How does Harvard select applicants? How important are marks? What are the people like? That's a really good question. Namaste everyone, this is Avanti Nagral, and today we're going to do a Q&A about Harvard. If you're an OG to this channel, you may know that we have made several videos about Harvard specifically, but also higher education, studying abroad, etc. If you're new here, I graduated from Harvard in 2020, did my undergrad there, and I got a degree in psychology and global health and health policy. I was also doing a dual degree program with the Berklee College of Music, which was a new program at the time, and I'm happy to share more information about that too. It has been a while since we've made videos in this realm, and I know right now is application season for a lot of folks. We're gonna focus specifically on Harvard-related questions for this one, but anything else you have, let me know in the comments below. And without further ado, let's go. The biggest mystery of all. How does Harvard select applicants? They are trying to make up the best class in terms of diversity, interests, backgrounds, to create the most interesting class. For example, every year at the undergrad level, they take about 1,600 students. And the 1,600 they take last year, if I replaced with another 1,600 from the hundreds of thousands of people that applied, it wouldn't really matter. What matters to them is how are we ensuring that we have as diverse a class as possible. So for example, are we balancing people's academic interests, extracurricular interests, financial backgrounds, diversity, etc., etc. Which is why it's super important to know that just because something worked for somebody in the past doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Let's say you know of somebody who's gotten in because they did some Olympiad, for example. Maybe that year there weren't as many people who did Olympiads, so they kind of stood out, but your year there might be hundreds of people who've done Olympiads. It's not like there's a quota for Olympiads, tuba player, nothing like that. It's just that they're trying to make up the most interesting class, so a lot of it's also a factor of luck, you know, in terms of how many people have that particular interest, which is why it's always a great idea to just stick to what you care about and don't try to mimic somebody else's application or what you think will work, because what works every year is so different. Someone who got in 5 years ago may not get in today, and vice versa. How important are marks? I have a bad GPA, but the website says marks are just a number that they consider. What are your thoughts? Because a majority of the people applying have baseline good grades, if you don't have really good grades, you're just not in the selected pile. But let's just say on average, the average person got, if in a percentage system, 88% or 90%. The thing is that you have so many people applying who are, at that average or above that average, that what they'll do is they'll take marks as your baseline. So if you meet the average or median marks, then you kind of pass through the next bucket. They'll look at that number, they'll be like, okay, this person has their baseline marks, good to go, let's move on and see the rest. Unfortunately, only in very rare circumstances do people who have significantly below the average marks stand a chance of getting in, only because grades seem to be a baseline. If you have around that average or above, you're fine. Which exam do you have to take? Is there a special exam you have to do? The main academic reference point or the main marks that they look at are your school and college marks. But there also are some standardized tests that you either are required or recommended to take, depending on what level you're applying at. So if you're applying at the undergrad level, some of the recommended exams are the SAT or the ACT. Applying at the graduate levels, depending on the programs you're in, it's either the GRE or the GMAT, or the LSAT if it's law school, or the MCAT if it's medical school. There's different, essentially, categories. So whichever program you're applying to, understand what that is. The reason they do that is because people applying are coming from very different backgrounds, very different countries, academic systems, and they just need one kind of standardized measure. Similar to how grades function, find out what the median or average score was. If your score is around the median or average or a little bit above, you're fine. Again, it's just a tick box. Like, imagine if there's a checklist. Does this person have our average grades? Check. Does this person have our average or above score on this standardized test? Check. Okay, now let's move on and see. It's like a filtering system. Imagine if there's a room and you have a lot of people trying to get into that room. They let the people in who have baseline grades, baseline marks, baseline XYZ, and then it keeps getting filtered smaller and smaller from those numbers. There are a lot of resources. I've made videos specifically on the SATs, which you can check out. We'll put a link to it here. Unlike systems that are purely academic, such as in India or the British system or some other countries in the world, these exams are not make or break, meaning you don't have to be the highest scorer. So long as you get the median average or above score, that's your baseline foot in the door entry to be considered for everything else. How much does it cost to go to Harvard? Can you please explain the fee structure? Great question. I'm going to break down the fee structure generally at all of the schools. For a majority of the schools, the undergraduate and the graduate level. The tuition fee is anywhere between $50,000 and $60,000 US per year. I believe at the undergrad level it's around $54,000. At the graduate level it might be closer to $57,000. Currently the cost of attendance for Harvard at the undergraduate level is around $79,000 a year. And what those extra fees cover are your housing, your food, student activities, maintenance, upkeep, and they have a pretty solid fee breakdown structure. At Harvard, specifically at the undergraduate level, living on campus is mandatory unless you have a very specific or compelling reason. And if you live on campus, food is also mandatory. But there are specific reasons. For example, one of my friends got married during our sophomore year, so he got an exception to live off campus. There are specific exceptions, but for the most part, I would say 95%, might even be more than that, live on campus. Now at the graduate level, of course, that is different. In fact, housing is not guaranteed and it's not available for everybody. So those costs are adjusted based on the current city living costs, but it comes to roughly the same, around $70,000 to $80,000 per year. Now this is just the general expenses. Obviously as a person you might have additional expenses like transportation and things like that. So I would roughly estimate it at around $80,000 to $83,000 a year. The one exception to that is the MBA program at business school. The average cost of attendance, they have a whole chart actually on their website, but the average cost of attendance is around $110,000, and it increases if you have, say, family or married or kids because of, health insurance and other costs that get added to that. And that's because the tuition of attendance at HBS is around $75,000+ a year. Now, some of these programs, like the undergrad is 4 years, master's programs are ranging anywhere between 1 to 4 to 8 years if you're doing a PhD. If you're doing a PhD, you also get paid a stipend. In some master's programs, you have a minimum, first 2 years you pay $50,000+, and then the last couple years you have a reduced fee. So it really depends program to program. You'll have to look specifically at the programs you're applying to. It is expensive. It's definitely an investment to understand what is possible and what's not. What kind of scholarships are available at Harvard? At the undergraduate level, Harvard is one of the few universities that is completely need blind for anybody applying. What does that mean? When you apply, and let's say you are in requirement of financial assistance, there are some universities that will take that information into account while accepting you or deciding to reject you because they have a limited number of people that they can fund. Harvard has a huge endowment, so that's not the case. Let's say you need 100% financial aid or you need 80%, and that's based on your family's income, and there's an income calculator on their website that you can check. Even if you mention that, that's not taken into account at all in the admissions process. If you happen to get in, then they will try to meet as much of your need as possible. So that's what the need blind means. They are blind to the needs you might have financially, and that does not affect whether you get in or not. What might be affected is if you do get in, how much aid do you get depending on all the calculations. Do you get it for all 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, etc., etc. This is true for international students as well, which is amazing because again, there are some universities that only offer financial aid to domestic students, meaning US-based students, but this is the case for international students regardless of where you're applying from, which is really good news. There's a lot of folks who have gotten full rides in that way. Be aware that these are just based on financial need and not on merit. There are some universities that have merit-based scholarships. Harvard is not one of them because a majority of the students who get in have the baseline merit that is required, but there are additional scholarships that you can try and apply to. In India, there's a couple different options, and I'm gonna, put a list right here. Globally, there's a bunch of different options as well. And if you're applying at the graduate level, there isn't that guaranteed financial aid. However, there are a lot of different scholarships you can apply to. You just have to be on top of them, know the deadlines, apply when they are, and see your eligibility requirements. Some of them are based on age, nationality, citizenship, status, etc. Are summer programs or international schools or programs necessary? Absolutely not. They're not necessary because they take kids from all sorts of backgrounds. So it doesn't matter at all whether you go to an IB school, an ICSE school, a GCSE school, a CBSE school, a state board. These are India-specific examples, but pretty much anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter what your academic background is. They just want to know what is available to you. And they'll understand at an IB curriculum school, there might be certain opportunities that are available in school. At others, you might have to seek things outside of school. Regardless, I would highly recommend whatever it is you're passionate about. Find out what the opportunities are in your school and at your college level, depending on whether you're applying for undergrad or master's, and what are other opportunities that are generally available in your environment, in your city. Now, you know, the world's oyster with technology and social media. Can you gain experience in the things you care about by possibly interning, showing leadership? The general qualities they care about with whatever it is you end up doing is, have you shown leadership, have you taken initiative, and have you taken it to the next level with whatever is possible. I'm happy to share more about my journey. I have in the several videos we've created before, but if you have any specific questions, happy to answer them too. What are the components of the Harvard application, for example, SOPs, essays, etc.? SOP stands for Statement of Purpose. That's actually usually more applicable to higher level graduate programs and programs in other countries, like the UK or Europe. The US, it's more of a personal essay, and it depends on the programs you're applying to. So at the undergraduate level, it's really a place where you share what you're passionate about, some sort of story about what's affected you. It's the only place on your application that you can show who you are and what your voice is. Let's break down all of the general components first. Your grades, which means your school or college grades, depending on the program you're applying to. Your standardized testing scores, CV or your resume. Usually there's a place where you can put in activities you've done, general points about your resume. Your extracurriculars, things you care about, there's usually a list. Then there's your essay, and sometimes some programs have more than one essay, and if it says that it's optional, please do it. They're also trying to see who takes extra initiative. Whatever you can do to maximize your application, please do it. Then there is your letters of recommendation. Then specific programs have specific other things. Sometimes there are interviews, sometimes there are other additional exams or processes, but those are the general components. Your essay should not be a regurgitation of your CV or resume. It should be a place where who you are shines through, what you care about. And show, don't tell. I have a video specifically on essays that explains this, but the general principle is, how can they get to know who you are in your voice? And similarly, your recommendations are the only place that somebody else's voice can vouch for you. So those are really, really important. It's more important to take a recommendation from somebody who knows you extremely well as a person than necessarily something you've done really well at. Only exceptions are, for example, if you're applying to a very specialized program or a master's program, you need to have recommendations from somebody you've worked with before, for example, or that's very specific to the field you're applying to. They should be able to talk or speak to your character, leadership qualities, things that make you tick, and that's an important conversation you should have with the person. What are the people like? That's a really good question. They're incredible, but also they're not these walking geniuses. You know, that was my assumption going in, but everyone's pretty normal, you know? And everyone's just, it's very clear that everyone who's there is passionate about something, which is why I loved the environment, because it was super motivating, because everyone is ambitious, but about very different things. So while it can get competitive, it doesn't have to, because I can be passionate about music and psychology and you can be passionate about astrophysics, and those are two completely different directions, but we can similarly be supportive in that way. But yeah, people are living absolutely chill, regular lives. There's nothing particularly special. A lot of it truly just comes down to luck, exposure, and so many things that just breaking down what the process is like, which is why if you're watching this video, you're already a step there. We have 30+ videos on this topic and education in general, but I'm definitely gonna make more because I've gotten a lot of questions from y'all recently, and whether that's higher education, school education, or the general social education we talk about, periods or sex ed or mental health, whatever it is, just let us know. I'm gonna try and do more Q&As, and obviously if you have more Harvard specific or higher education specific or studying abroad questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll try and answer them as best as I can. Maybe we can do a part 2. And thank you for watching. Also, in other news, we are going to launch a couple channels where we have smaller clips and bite-sized pieces about education that you can just tap into, so just stay tuned for updates. Also some regional channels, so perhaps you can share this information with people for whom English is not their first language, and to make it more accessible and easy. Hope this is helpful, and sending loads and loads of love. I hope you have an amazing day.
Label this a joy. Let it be a physical experience. That's all.